Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a world where the sun never sets, or at least it feels that way. Imagine this. An endless, frozen plain stretches in every direction. The snow under your boots crunches like brittle glass. The air smells like absolutely nothing, because it's too cold for scent to survive. And the light is so bright, it almost hums. You're not just surrounded by white. You are inside it. It's all-consuming. You squint. Your eyes water. There's nowhere to hide. And if you're not careful, your own eyeballs might just go on strike. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing where these sleepy travels are taking place. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the Arctic now. Not some sanitized nature documentary version, but the real one, where every step is a decision, every gust of wind has an opinion, and every patch of snow looks exactly like the last one. You're bundled in fur, the kind that still smells faintly of muskox, and your eyelashes are freezing together in little icy kisses. The cold here isn't mean, it's just disinterested. It's the kind of cold that doesn't care whether you make it. And the sun? It's not comforting, it's aggressive. In this landscape, light behaves differently, ricocheting off every snowdrift, bouncing like a pinball between ice crystals, and blinding you in slow motion. It's a disco ball of doom. You might think, oh, at least the sun's out. But here, that's less a blessing and more a personal attack. You're surrounded by a dome of brightness that never lets up, and there are no trees to cast a shadow, no buildings to duck behind, and certainly no corner cafes offering polarized lenses and overpriced espresso. Your sled dogs don't care either. They're trotting along with the indifference of seasoned commuters, their breath puffing into little clouds of steam, occasionally glancing back like, "You good?" Spoiler, you're not. Your eyes are starting to burn. It's not pain exactly, it's more like your eyes have turned into overworked interns and are now threatening to unionize. Snow blindness. That's the polite term. The Inuit call it nunakulik in some dialects, though the words vary across regions and time. It's essentially a sunburn on your eyeballs. Not a metaphor. The UV rays reflect so violently off the snow that they literally fry the surface of your cornea. Blinking becomes a trial. Seeing becomes optional. You'd cry, but your tears would freeze. So you do what any sensible person would do. You look down and keep going. But even that's not enough. The whiteness pushes up from below, crawls into your peripheral vision, and sets up camp. You start seeing weird spots, phantom shapes, the shadow of ravens that aren't there. You stumble. Your sense of direction begins to tilt. That's how dangerous this can be. Not just uncomfortable, lethal. One misstep into a snow-covered crevasse or an icy river, and it's over. You become part of the landscape, a very cold, cautionary tale. Now imagine you're an Inuit hunter 600 years ago. Same blinding conditions, same relentless white. But instead of designer goggles or ski visors, you've got what's around you: bone, driftwood, sinew, stone. And somehow, using these raw ingredients, you're going to invent a pair of sunglasses so elegant, so minimal, so effective, that even modern engineers still marvel at the design. That's where we're heading tonight. You'll feel the weight of the antler in your hand. You'll hear the scrape of flint against bone. You'll smell the seal fat softening in a pot nearby, keeping tools pliable and fingers warm. And slowly, through trial and error, you'll shape something that doesn't just block the sun. It turns it into an ally. Historians still argue whether the invention came first in one specific tribe or if it evolved simultaneously across coastal and inland regions. Some suggest it was sparked by contact with Chukchi peoples from across the Bering Strait. Others believe it was born purely of necessity and a little bit of genius. One of those ideas that emerges naturally when survival and creativity meet in the snow. Here's the twist, though. This wasn't just a one-time hack. Inuit snow goggles, also called ilgak or igak, depending on the region, became a cultural staple. They were passed down, personalized, even decorated. Some had geometric carvings, others bore the marks of old stories or clan identifiers. They weren't just gear, they were art. And unlike today's sunglasses, which we toss in glove compartments and sit on in cafes, these were precious. Hand-carved, fitted to your specific face, a rite of passage in some cases. Kids would start out with training goggles, yes, really, and graduate to the adult versions once they began joining longer expeditions. But for now, you're still the apprentice, a slightly frost-bitten rookie with watery eyes and a healthy fear of snowbanks. And yet, you're about to become part of something timeless. The making of a tool so understated, it's easy to miss just how revolutionary it is. So walk a little farther. The light will only get brighter, but so will the solution. You trudge onward, blinking hard against the whiteout. The sun hovers low on the horizon like it's considering setting. But don't be fooled. It's not going anywhere. In this part of the Arctic, during certain times of year, the sun just circles lazily overhead for days, even weeks. Imagine someone leaving the ceiling light on and walking away. Forever. That's what it feels like. The ground is uneven. Not dramatically, just enough to keep you guessing. Your boots crunch over wind-scoured ice one minute, then sink into powder the next. And all the while, the light assaults you from every angle. It comes straight down from the sky, bounces off the snow, and even sneaks up from behind you like a nosy cousin. You're stuck inside a giant bowl of mirrored milk. The Inuit didn't just live in this world, they read it like a book. They knew the signs, how the snow drifts in ribbons across the ice when the wind shifts, how the angle of a shadow at midday could tell you the weather tomorrow. But even with all that knowledge, their eyes were just as vulnerable as yours. Maybe more so. After all, their lives depended on being able to track the twitch of a seal's nose from 50 yards away. That's why light mattered, not just in terms of brightness, but behavior. You pause and squint sideways. There's something odd about the way the light falls across a nearby snowbank. It's too sharp, too glittery. You reach down, grab a handful, and tilt it in your mittened hand. The crystals refract like tiny prisms, turning the snow into confetti made of diamonds. Beautiful, also dangerous. See, Arctic snow isn't just snow. It's a material with personality. The kind of snow that's falling now, fluffy, fresh, barely packed, is harmless enough. But give it time, let the wind polish it, let the sun bake it a little, and it becomes something else entirely. A surface so reflective it could tan your face faster than a beach in Ibiza, and not in a fun way. Historians still debate whether early Inuit groups had a formal term for all these snow types, or if it was more of an instinctual understanding passed through gesture and context. There's that old cliché that they had 50 words for snow, but that's a bit of a linguistic oversimplification. What they did have, undeniably, was a rich observational vocabulary. You didn't need a long glossary. You just needed to know the difference between the snow that would hide a polar bear and the kind that would blind you. Now you start noticing other signs, a subtle shift in the way the wind carries sound, the fact that even your footprints are casting faint shadows now. The sun's getting lower in the sky, technically, but its power hasn't dimmed. If anything, the lower it gets, the more dangerous it becomes, because now the light is hitting the snow at just the right angle to weaponize itself. A horizontal blast of UV, bouncing straight into your eyes like it has an agenda. You squint again. Your vision blurs. And just like that, you get it. You get why the Inuit didn't just throw up a hood and call it a day. They needed something better. Something built for this exact moment, this exact quality of light. And so, out of nothing but necessity and creativity, came the snow goggles. But don't get ahead of yourself. Before the goggles, there were experiments, some more effective than others. Some oral traditions mention people smearing soot under their eyes, like reverse football players, to cut the glare. Others tried layering animal hide over their face, poking holes just wide enough to see through. Some may have even tried woven sinew visors, like early mesh screens. Fringe as it sounds, the idea was always the same. Let in some light, block the rest. You reach into your pack and pull out a small bundle wrapped in sealskin. Inside is your prize, a chunk of smooth driftwood, a piece of caribou antler, and a short strip of sinew. These are your materials. No plastic, no elastic band, just what nature hands you, if you're lucky and know where to look. And you start to really look now. The world isn't just white, it's detailed. The snow near the edge of the frozen river has a blue cast, like the shadow of something ancient. The ice up on the ridge looks cracked but solid, like glass that's been trampled by ghosts. And everywhere, that humming brightness, that vibration of light you feel more than see. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe through your scarf. The air is dry, stripped of moisture, and it catches in your throat like powdered chalk. Still, it's better than staring at the sunlit snow another minute. A little farther now, and you reach the camp. There's a low igloo-shaped shelter, smoke curling from a seal-fat lamp at the entrance. Inside, elders sit around, chewing dried fish, telling stories with their hands and eyebrows as much as their words. One of them looks up at you and points to your squinting eyes. He chuckles softly. You've got the look of someone who's seen too much light and not enough wisdom. So you sit. You warm your hands over the lamp. And someone hands you a pair of goggles, not to wear yet, but to study. They're beautiful in their simplicity. A thin strip of wood, gently curved, with two narrow horizontal slits carved through the center. The inside edges are blackened with soot, not just for flair, but to absorb stray light and reduce glare. A strip of sinew once held them snug to the wearer's head. No screws, no hinges, no branding. Just usefulness, perfected. You run your fingers over the surface. It's been worn smooth by years of use, maybe even generations. And suddenly, you feel connected, not just to the object, but to the maker. Someone sat here just like you, scraping and sanding, fitting and adjusting until the balance was just right. A pair of ancient sunglasses born not from fashion, but from survival. That's the light you live in now, and soon you'll learn how to shape it. The fire crackles beside you, a low, steady flame fueled by chunks of dried moss and seal fat, casting a soft amber light that barely competes with the Arctic sun still blasting in from outside. You're sitting cross-legged, a half-finished pair of snow goggles resting in your lap. You tilt them in your hands, observing the clean lines of the narrow eye slits and the soft grain of the driftwood. They're simple, elegant, functional, and suddenly you're wondering, who figured this out? Who first looked at a sunburned eyeball and said, "Let's fix that with a sliver of caribou antler"? The truth is, we don't know. Not exactly. There are no diaries, no patents, no inventor's monologue etched into a rock for archaeologists to decode. But we do have evidence in the form of eye injuries, recovered artifacts, and the oral stories passed down through generations. Before goggles, there were consequences, and those consequences were written in the strained squints and damaged vision of early Arctic hunters. Snow blindness didn't kill you exactly, but it made sure something else would. The loss of eyesight, even for a few hours, could be catastrophic. You couldn't travel, couldn't hunt, couldn't even cook or build shelter effectively. And worse, it hurt. A lot. The corneas would redden and swell. People would describe stabbing pain behind the eyes, tears they couldn't stop, and even hallucinations when the damage got intense. If you've ever had sand in your eye, now imagine the sand is also angry and on fire. Some evidence of these afflictions is preserved in early Inuit remains, skulls showing signs of orbital inflammation or unusual pressure marks. Of course, not all signs survive in the bones, but those that do tell part of the story. The rest comes from oral traditions, stories told around fires like this one. Tales of ancestors who wandered too long on the ice without protection. Their eyes turned red and swollen, their vision never the same again. In some stories, they become cautionary spirits, blinded travelers forever drifting the white plains. Think of them as ghostly optometry warnings. And that pain? It's what led to the need. Necessity really is the mother of invention, and when your eyes are on fire in the middle of nowhere, you get pretty creative. Historians still argue whether these goggles were invented in one burst of genius by a single community, or emerged gradually, with each group adapting materials they had on hand. Some say the earliest versions came from inland tundra dwellers using birch bark and sinew. Others insist coastal groups shaped driftwood and whalebone first, then passed the design inland via trade and migration. What we do know is that multiple versions have been found across Inuit regions, from the Siberian side of the Bering Strait to Greenland. The styles differ slightly, some wider slits, some narrower, some straight across the eyes, others curved like an eyebrow in mid-smirk. But the function remains the same. Block light, reduce glare, save your retinas. You pick up a scraping tool now, just a sharpened chip of slate bound to a bone handle with sinew. It's surprisingly light. You test its edge against the surface of the driftwood, shaving off a paper-thin curl. It smells faintly of salt and thyme, like the memory of a tree that once drifted for weeks along Arctic currents before beaching itself on a pebbled shore. Driftwood, in case you're wondering, is kind of a miracle up here. Trees don't grow in most of the high Arctic, but rivers from the south carry logs for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers, until they wash up on desolate beaches like lost messages. That's the trick of Arctic innovation. You work with what the world gives you. Bone from hunted animals, sinew from tendons, stone that chips clean, a little soot from the lamp. Nothing is wasted. Everything serves a second or third purpose. You scrape carefully, narrowing the slits just a hair more. The design is counterintuitive. You might think tiny slits would make it harder to see, but here's the thing. The slits focus the incoming light. They let in just enough for clarity while cutting the lateral glare. It's the same principle as squinting when you're trying to read something far away. Your eye does it naturally. The goggles just do it better, and without giving you crow's feet. And there's another secret benefit. The goggles don't just block UV rays, they sharpen your vision. The narrow slits increase depth of field, which is a fancy way of saying they make far-off things clearer. Seal? Or just a suspicious lump of ice? With goggles on, you'll know. Of course, this all required skill. The slits had to be the right width, not too narrow, or you'd be fumbling in the snow like a mole. Not too wide, or you'd be squinting again. Some elders say the slits were custom fit to the user's eyes, adjusted over time. You imagine someone sitting just like you centuries ago, eyes red from a misadventure, shaping a second version, then a third. Trial, error, eventually mastery. The process wasn't just technical, it was personal. Often a father might craft a first pair for his child, carving little designs into the surface to mark the beginning of their learning years. Some were painted with ochre, others etched with animal tracks, stars, or family symbols. More than tools, these were heirlooms, and they carried memory. You test the fit against your face. Not bad. A little tight on the cheekbones, but that can be shaved down. Through the slits, the world narrows into focus. The overwhelming white becomes manageable. The sun still shines, but it no longer dominates. The land feels less like an adversary now, more like background music. Someone across the fire chuckles, nudges you, and gestures toward the entrance. Outside, a group of hunters prepares to head out. They're gearing up, checking sled runners, coaxing dogs, pulling fur-lined hoods tight, and every single one of them wears goggles. Some are carved bone, others look like they've been reinforced with strips of baleen or hide, but all have those same narrow eye slits, like the horizon's been sliced just wide enough to read. You watch them go. Their goggles glint in the sun like the eyes of wise snow spirits, silent, steady, seeing what others can't. And you suddenly realize you're not just making a tool. You're stepping into a tradition, one passed from scarred eyes to clear ones, from wind-chapped hands to yours. Time to carve again. The light has shifted. Not dimmed exactly, but taken on that late-day quality, the kind of sideways glow that makes every snowdrift throw a longer shadow than seems possible. And through the slits in your nearly finished goggles, the world now feels quieter, more contained. Like someone dimmed the room and whispered, "You'll want to see this more slowly." You rub your thumbs gently over the soot-blackened interior, spreading the fine layer along the inner edge. It's not just for show. That thin coat of soot, made from the char of lamp smoke or burnt driftwood, serves as a natural light absorber. A primitive matte finish. Try not to get it on your parka, though. The stuff smudges faster than peanut butter on suede. Around you, the camp has settled into a rhythm. Kids slide over the ice on their bellies, laughing with that uniquely Arctic resilience. Frost on their eyelashes, joy in their breath. A woman is carefully slicing frozen fish into translucent slivers, the kind you could hold to the sun and see through. The dogs are quiet for now, sprawled in little fur puddles near the sleds. But beneath the calm, everyone's preparing. Because travel and hunting start early. You rise, stretching out the ache in your legs, and walk toward the edge of camp. Just past the ring of igloos and snow shelters lies a cache, a half-buried structure made of stone, bone, and snow, storing extra supplies. And here, nestled among bundles of sinew cord and wrapped tools, are the raw materials for more goggles. Pieces of bone, driftwood, and antler, already sized and drying. You pick one up, a curved shard of caribou antler. It fits neatly in your palm, smooth on one side, porous on the other. Lighter than you'd expect, and durable. This isn't just scrap, it's prime building stock. Bone, particularly antler or walrus ivory, was often chosen for its strength and flexibility. Driftwood had to be seasoned. Antler could be steamed, carved, even boiled to make it bend more easily. But materials were never picked randomly. The Inuit were resource economists before the term existed. That smooth driftwood you admired earlier, maybe it becomes the frame of a goggle. The slightly splintered one, better used for kindling. Even the rejected pieces might be used for sled repair, tent toggles, or, as one elder grins, chew toys for restless sled dogs. You return to your work and begin the fine carving. This is the part where art meets science. The goggles you're crafting need to follow the contours of your face, not just for comfort, but for insulation. Air gaps mean cold leaks in and breath fogs up the interior. Worse, a poor fit lets in stray light. The slit size, curve, and nose bridge must all align with your bone structure, your brow, your cheeks. It's eyewear and engineering. Historians still argue whether the earliest goggles were carved by specialists or if every adult made their own. Some suggest that goggle making was passed down in gendered lines. fathers to sons, mothers adjusting their children's pairs with careful hand sanding. Others think it was a community skill, something everyone knew how to do in case of need. Most likely, it was both. Survival didn't favor narrow job descriptions. You pause for a moment, eyeing your handiwork. The slits are a hair uneven. Not enough to ruin the pair, but enough that you notice. You reach for a sliver of sandstone, wet it with your breath, and begin to smooth. The grain of the stone hums slightly as it meets bone. It's a soothing sound, rhythmic and crisp. Sanding goggles. Not quite a spa day, but surprisingly meditative. Nearby, an elder begins telling a story. You catch bits and pieces as you work. Something about a hunter long ago who forgot his goggles and tried to squint his way across a sunlit plain. The story ends with the hunter being guided home by the sound of his dogs, having gone half-blind and wandered in circles for hours. A lesson, not a joke, though a few chuckles follow anyway. Humor up here is a kind of insurance policy against disaster. And then comes a quieter tale, one that makes you pause mid-sanding. A woman once carved a pair of goggles not for herself, but for her husband who'd lost most of his sight in a storm. She carved the slits wider, angled downward slightly, so that he could see enough to move through camp, but not risk pain from the light. She painted the outside with charcoal swirls, not for function, just love. The goggles helped a little, enough that he could sit with her at night and watch the shadows lengthen. There's something deeply human about that detail. These goggles weren't just tools, they were intimate objects. They sat against your skin for hours each day, shaped to your face alone. In a world of harsh angles and survival decisions, this one piece of equipment was uniquely yours. You finish sanding and try them on again. This time, the fit is better. The slits line up neatly. You can feel the light narrowing, becoming linear, precise. The blinding Arctic becomes a crisp, grayscale panorama. Every detail sharpened, every shimmer dulled to a manageable glow. You can see the footprints of a ptarmigan, the slope of an ice ridge, the faint movement of something in the distance. Maybe seal, maybe shadow. It's not magic. It's geometry and ancient physics. The narrow slits limit the light waves that hit your eye at odd angles. They improve contrast. Some people even say the view through snow goggles mimics how certain Arctic animals see. A flattened horizon with enhanced depth. And quietly, there's something else. You feel cool, like a snowbound secret agent. These goggles may not come in tortoiseshell or be featured in fashion blogs, but when you walk across the ice tomorrow, you'll move with the confidence that only comes from good gear. You pack up your tools. The wind is picking up, whistling softly between snow walls. The kids have gone inside. Someone's making stew, probably fish, definitely strong. You can almost taste the salt in the air. Tomorrow you'll test the goggles on the open ice. But tonight, you rest. Your eyes, for the first time in days, feel protected. And you think of all the generations who once sat exactly like this, whittling down a piece of bone into something that didn't just block the sun, but let them move through it. You wake before the sun, though. To be fair, sunrise is kind of a loose concept this far north. The sky just gradually shrugs off its dusky jacket, and suddenly everything's lit up in that chilly pastel glow that says, time to move. You stretch, pull on your boots with fingers still slow from sleep, and reach for the goggles you shaped last night. They're cold to the touch, bone always is, but they warm quickly against your cheek as you slide them on. The eye slits narrow your world, but also sharpen it. No more blinding white, just a silvery spread of ice and snow, shaped into curves and hollows like the frozen face of the moon. You're headed out with a small hunting party. 4 others, 2 sleds, a dozen dogs total. The dogs howl excitedly as the harnesses go on, their breath billowing like tiny steam engines. They know what's coming. They live for this. As the sled jerks forward, the wind hits you full in the face, but not in the eyes. Your goggles do their job. No squinting, no tearing up. You can see cleanly across the tundra, each snowbank and ridge crisply defined. It's like going from a fuzzy old TV to HD, except your high definition comes courtesy of a split piece of antler and some burnt soot. There's a rhythm to travel out here. Dogs pant, sled runners hiss across packed snow, and your boots thump gently as you help push uphill. Conversation is minimal, partly out of energy conservation and partly because your face is mostly covered. But every so often someone grunts an observation. Fox trail. Ice thinner here. Seal crack ahead. These aren't dramatic proclamations, they're survival notes. And it's not just the eyes that need protection. The rest of your face is wrapped in layers of fur and hide, with only your nose barely exposed. But still, without goggles, you'd be blinded by now. Sunlight bouncing off snow can reach levels of UV exposure that would make a tropical beach look tame. Historians still argue whether the earliest Arctic travelers knew they were blocking UV light specifically, or if they just knew it hurt less to wear the goggles. Either way, they got it right. There's something else the goggles do. They help with focus, literally and figuratively. The narrow field of vision forces you to pay attention, to track movement across a lean slit of horizon, to scan the snow not as a blur of whiteness, but as a landscape with nuance. You start to notice things others might miss. A faint depression in the ice that could mean a breathing hole, or the way the wind has shaped the snow into soft dunes, each one telling a story about what passed through last night. The lead hunter raises a hand, signaling a stop. You all slow to a halt, dogs panting eagerly, tongues lolling. He points to a narrow line of cracks just ahead, signs of shifting sea ice. You dismount, cautious. One wrong step, and it's not just your feet getting wet. The crack is new, maybe a day old, but it runs long and low, meaning the ice on the other side might be thinner. As you crouch to examine it, your goggles give you just enough clarity to see the wet glisten below. Not broken through, but you wouldn't want to linger. One of the others chuckles, tapping his goggles. Better than that time Kajak tried to use his mittens as a sun visor. You snort, laugh. The mental image is both ridiculous and entirely believable. Improvisation is a big part of life here, but not all improvisations are equal. In the quieter moments, like now, when the dogs are still and the wind hushes for a breath, you realize how much you've come to trust your goggles. Not just as a piece of gear, but as an extension of your instincts. Without them, you'd be squinting into a blinding void. With them, you feel competent, ready. The materials that go into making them feel even more meaningful out here. That bone came from a hunt like this one. That soot came from a lamp fueled by seal oil, gathered and rendered by someone who knew how much light a home needs through long winter months. Each part of the goggles has a story, and now they're helping you live one of your own. As the group moves again, you let yourself relax a little into the rhythm. You think about all the different materials Inuit people have used for goggles across regions and generations: driftwood in the western Arctic, caribou antler inland, walrus ivory in coastal areas, even baleen in some cases, those thin plates from a whale's mouth, flexible and strong. And in emergencies, some say they carved emergency pairs out of frozen fish skin or bundled cords of hide, innovation by necessity again. There's an open scholarly debate about when exactly the Inuit began to use goggles. Some argue they originated thousands of years ago, spreading east from Siberia across the Bering Strait with migrating peoples. Others believe they were developed independently in multiple regions, tailored to local resources and sun conditions. What's clear is that by the time Europeans first encountered Inuit communities, the goggles were already in widespread use, and the newcomers quickly realized their value. You remember hearing about the early explorers, men in heavy coats and impractical boots, who scoffed at native dress and tools until they found themselves half-blind and frostbitten. Then, suddenly, that odd-looking slit mask became the hottest accessory of the expedition. There's something quietly satisfying in that. A distant bark snaps your attention back. The lead sled has stopped again, this time at a likely seal hole, a dark, wet patch in the snow, barely noticeable unless you've been trained to see it. You kneel, goggles still on, peering through the slit. Sure enough, a faint trail of bubbles beneath the ice. The hunter beside you readies his spear. No loud movements, no shouting, just patience and stillness. Goggles on, breath slow, eyes scanning the surface. The only sound is the soft hiss of wind and the low whine of a restless dog. It's not glamorous, this kind of hunting. It takes hours, sometimes days. But when the strike comes, if it comes, it'll be fast, and it'll mean food, warmth, fuel, everything. You shift your weight, the goggles holding tight to your face. They don't fog, they don't slip, they just work. And in a place like this, where one small mistake can mean the end of a journey, that's no small thing. The seal didn't surface. That's just how it goes sometimes. The breathing hole was fresh, the signs were promising. But after 2 long hours kneeling in the cold, your joints aching and your face half frozen despite the layers, there's still nothing but the occasional whisper of snow blown across the ice. The hunter gives a small shake of his head. Nothing dramatic, just the silent signal that it's time to move on. You stand slowly, legs stiff from stillness. The goggles you carved catch a glint of the pale sun, now slung low across the horizon. That weird half-day, half-night light again. Like the world stuck on a dimmer switch that nobody wants to fully commit to. You tug the goggles slightly tighter against your face. Even this late in the day, the brightness off the snow would still sting without them. Back on the sled, you fall into the rhythm once more. Hiss, jingle, pant, jolt. Dogs barking with excitement as they cross a familiar ridge. And in this lull, your mind drifts, naturally, to a question that people rarely ask out loud, but everyone eventually thinks about. What did people do before goggles? Because the Arctic didn't suddenly become bright in the last few hundred years. The sun has been bouncing off snow and ice for millennia. And so, before slit goggles, what? Some historians suggest that the earliest Arctic peoples simply squinted and suffered. Others argue they might have used crude coverings, fur-lined hoods pulled low, hands raised against the glare, or pieces of hide with tiny pinholes. There's even a theory that some groups rubbed ash or grease around their eyes to cut the glare, much like athletes smearing black under their eyes today. You remember one story, maybe apocryphal, but fun anyway, about a hunter who held a flat piece of fish skin, carefully scraped and dried, in front of his face like a translucent shield. Not quite sunglasses, more like sun smudge. It didn't work well. He walked into a snowbank. Nobody let him forget it. Eventually, though, the slit goggles emerged, not all at once and not identical across groups. But the core idea was there. Narrow the light, enhance the view, avoid the burn. A solution born not from luxury or experimentation, but from immediate need. Eyes swollen shut from snow blindness don't just hurt, they leave you helpless. And if there's one thing you don't want to be out here, it's helpless. The goggles evolved over time. Early versions were likely flat, with simple slits and minimal shaping. Later ones were contoured, snug to the face, even decorated. Some had tiny nose ridges carved into them, or small vent holes along the top to reduce fogging from breath. It wasn't just about function anymore. It was finesse. You pull off your goggles for a moment, just to feel the contrast. The white glare stabs at your eyes like tiny icicle daggers. It's amazing how fast you forget what the full, unfiltered tundra looks like, and even more amazing how fast you want to filter it again. Back on they go, as the group pauses to check another path, a long ridge that could lead toward an ice crack favored by seals. You find yourself admiring someone else's goggles. They're made of polished driftwood, darker than yours, with slits shaped in a slight V, the kind of design that funnels your vision forward, narrowing your gaze like the sights on a bow. Sleek, streamlined, almost sporty in an ancient Arctic kind of way. You ask quietly if you can try them. The other hunter nods. You swap pairs and slide his goggles on. Immediately, the world looks different, not better or worse, just reframed. His slits are narrower than yours, letting in less light but making distant shapes stand out more. You can see across the frozen bay where a few dark dots, maybe seals, maybe hunched rocks, punctuate the otherwise smooth expanse. You hand them back, impressed. It's a reminder that goggles weren't one size fits all. Inuit communities across different regions developed subtly different styles, depending on the light, landscape, and available materials. The Western Inuit favored bone and ivory. The Eastern Inuit often used wood. Some preferred horizontal slits, others angled. There were even differences in how the straps were tied, some over the crown, some behind the head. Historians still debate whether these design changes were based more on personal preference or environmental need. Was it fashion? Function? Both? There's no clear answer, but you suspect that, like most things, it was a mix. Humans, after all, have never been purely practical. We decorate our tools, personalize our weapons, carve designs into even the most utilitarian gear. Why wouldn't we treat goggles the same way? Back in camp, you remember seeing one pair etched with tiny spirals, so faint you almost missed them. When you asked the elder about it, he just smiled and said, "That was my grandfather's mark." He said the spirals were how he saw the wind. You like that? The sled slows again. The lead hunter lifts a hand, pointing ahead. Not a seal hole this time, but something more promising. A series of tracks, fresh and staggered, leading toward a ridge. Not large, maybe Arctic hare or fox, but worth following. You hop down, letting your boots sink slightly into the snow, the crunch a satisfying softness beneath your steps. The goggles help again. You can trace the path more easily with the glare cut down. The fine details, individual paw pads, drag marks from a tail, pop into view. You find yourself smiling. It's weirdly satisfying tracking something you haven't even seen yet. As the team adjusts direction, you reflect on how many layers of technology exist in these simple tools. Not just the physical materials, but the cultural knowledge passed down to make them. Someone had to figure out the slit width. Someone else discovered that blackening the inside helped reduce glare even more. Others learned which materials wouldn't freeze to your skin in -40 weather. There's something deeply elegant about it. No batteries, no switches, just physics, patience, and inherited wisdom. And here you are, wearing goggles you carved yourself, gliding over the snow, eyes steady, heart calm, chasing fox prints beneath a pale Arctic sun. You follow the tracks up a low ridge, the wind at your back and the sun spilling slanted light across the snow like spilled milk. The prints weave in and out of shallow drifts, pausing now and then at spots where the animal probably stopped to sniff or listen. The slope ahead is gentle, just steep enough to make you lean into it a little. Your sled waits below, the dogs huffing and whining softly, just enough to remind you they're ready whenever you are. As you climb, the goggles keep your vision crisp. The dark interior and narrow slits concentrate your view like a camera lens. You almost feel like you're wearing the snow, not just walking through it. Everything feels closer, more immediate. The tiny glint of frost on a bent stalk of grass. The almost hidden dip where a snow hare might have paused to dig. These are details you might miss without the goggles. But with them, you're practically a detective. You crest the ridge and there it is, an Arctic fox nearly invisible against the snow. Its coat blends so perfectly that it takes a few seconds to realize you're looking at fur and not just another snowdrift. The fox turns its head, ears twitching, and locks eyes with you for one surreal heartbeat before it skitters away, barely leaving a trace behind. You exhale. Not disappointment exactly, just that odd tangle of awe and longing. The thrill of the hunt without the catch. The story even without the trophy. You don't pursue, not because you couldn't, but because today's not about foxes. It's about the journey, the tools, the knowing that you could have gone after it if you wanted to, and that your goggles would have helped you do it. As you descend the ridge, your feet crunching softly in the old fox tracks, you think about how eyesight is a kind of superpower out here. People imagine Arctic survival as brute strength or raw courage, and sure, there's some of that. But mostly, it's about what you notice, what you read from a patch of snow or a curve in the wind. That fox knew when to pause and when to vanish. And so do you. Back at the sled, one of the younger hunters gestures for a break. You agree. It's time to eat. The group unpacks a few wrapped bundles from the sleds. Dried fish, seal meat, a hard chunk of frozen berries that thaw a little as you hold them in your mitts. You don't take off your goggles. No need. You can see fine, and besides, taking them off just to eat is how people lose things. Or get blinded by an unexpected shaft of sun. As you chew, you glance around at the others. Everyone's wearing goggles. Different shapes, different fits, but all variations on the same theme. Some have a bit of fur lining the edges for comfort. One pair is carved so intricately you can just make out tiny animals scratched into the wood, probably done during a long, dark winter. Someone jokes about a traveler they once saw from the south, brought ski goggles with him, thinking he was prepared. But they fogged up immediately, froze solid, and cracked within a day. You laugh along. It's not mean-spirited, just expected. That's the thing modern folks don't always get. Arctic gear isn't just old, it's refined, time-tested, passed down because it works, not because of some quaint nostalgia. Your goggles are the result of generations of trial and error. Every scratch and slit and curve exists because someone learned the hard way what didn't work. You remember something an elder once told you. We don't invent things just to invent. We listen to the snow, to the animals, to the wind. That's how you make something good. There's an open scholarly debate about how these traditional tools are classified in the Western world. Are they inventions, crafts, technologies? Anthropologists still argue over terminology, as if the right word might somehow make these objects more real. But out here, you don't need a category. You just need something that keeps you from going snowblind. As the meal winds down, someone pulls out a small tin of lamp soot, blackened residue from an old oil lamp. Carefully, with a fingertip, he dabs a bit onto the inside of his goggles, then rubs it gently until it coats the surface. It's like anti-glare polish. Not essential, but helpful. Makes the dark interior even darker, the contrast even sharper. You take your turn, adding just a hint of soot to your own goggles. There's something oddly intimate about it. A little ritual, half practical, half spiritual, like you're blessing your sight. After the break, you travel on. The sled glides smoothly now, the snow packed just right, the dogs in sync. You're not headed anywhere dramatic, just following a known path, checking a few places where game might be found. It's the kind of day that blurs together, soft-edged and slow, but the goggles keep you present. You notice things, how the light changes color as a cloud passes overhead, how a raven circling above casts two shadows instead of one. You see the shimmer of heat rising from a crack in the ice, so faint it could be a trick of the eye. But it's real. That means something warm below. A breathing hole? Maybe. Maybe not. There's a kind of meditation to the movement. You stop thinking about time. The goggles narrow your view just enough that you forget the big picture and find yourself in the moment. Hours later, when the group begins turning back toward camp, you feel a little reluctant. Not because you haven't found enough or walked enough, but because you've gotten used to the quiet clarity, the rhythm, the slit-eyed perspective that somehow makes the world feel more focused, not less. As the sun dips low again, though it never rose that high to begin with, you make your way across the final stretch of snow. The wind is stronger now, and the goggles protect you not just from the light, but from the sting of ice crystals blowing sideways across the plain. You arrive at camp tired, but not drained. Just that kind of good, earned tiredness that comes from a full day outdoors. You remove your goggles and give them a quick check. No cracks, no splinters, still dark inside, still warm from your face. You run a finger along the edge where your name is scratched, barely visible, but there. Proof that they're yours. Proof that you carved them, wore them, and came back with your eyes still clear. You hang them carefully, ready for tomorrow. The night sets in quietly, like a thick, soft blanket thrown over the world. You step out of the snow house, goggles now hanging around your neck, forgotten for a moment in the dim Arctic twilight. The wind has calmed, and the dogs are curled in half moons beside the sleds, their breath fogging the air in gentle pulses. This is the part of the evening you love most. Everything is hushed, even your footsteps feel muffled, like the snow itself is asking you to walk softly. You peer up at the sky, one of those rare, utterly clear nights where the stars look etched into the dark. The moon hangs low and lazy, its pale light bouncing off the snow in a cool, even glow. You won't need your goggles for a while, not until the sun creeps back up again. Inside the snow house, the warmth is startling. Body heat, seal oil lamps, and thick skins do their job. The air smells faintly of smoke and seal fat, and someone's roasting a sliver of dried meat over the flame. You settle in, legs stretched out, shoulders heavy with the kind of fatigue that doesn't beg for escape. It welcomes rest. Across from you, an elder holds a pair of goggles in his hands. Older than yours, worn smooth with use. The slits are slightly crooked, the fit clearly made for someone with a wider nose. He's polishing the surface with a twist of caribou sinew and a dab of lamp soot, humming quietly as he works. "You ever try carving bone?" he asks, not looking up. You nod. "Ivory, once. Too soft. I cracked it." He chuckles. "Everyone cracks the first one." That leads to a long, gentle discussion about materials, the kind only people who've truly worked with their hands will appreciate. You talk about driftwood versus caribou antler, the pros and cons of seal rib bone. One hunter swears by baleen, which is flexible, smooth, and almost impossible to find unless you're lucky with a beached whale. Historians still argue, the elder says, squinting at the soot on his goggles, whether we came up with these goggles before we needed them, or because we needed them so badly, we had no choice. It's not a question that needs answering, but it lingers in the firelight. You think about the process of making a pair, start to finish. Not just the carving, but the finding. You have to spot the right piece of material, something not too brittle, not too porous. Then you soak it, sometimes for days, until it softens enough to work. You shape it slowly, always along the grain, because against the grain is how you get cracks. Then comes sanding, polishing, soot coating. The slits are last. The slits are always last. You once tried cutting the slits too early, eager to see the world through them. The goggles warped as they dried. They didn't sit flush against your face, and snow glare seeped in. Lesson learned. Tonight you listen as the elder tells the story of his own first pair. It took him a month, he says. They were hideous, uneven slits, lopsided straps. But he wore them anyway, because there's something sacred about wearing what you made with your own hands. Even when it's not perfect, you understand that feeling. There's something grounding about tools that aren't store-bought, something real. And in a world where so much is out of your control, the weather, the game, the ice, it helps to hold something you shaped, something that works because you made it so. Later, as the lamp dims and the fire cracks down to glowing coals, the elder passes his goggles around the circle. Everyone takes a look. They're scratched and stained, yes, but the shape is right, the slit angle just so. You hold them up to your face and peer through. The world narrows again. The stars outside now line up perfectly in your view, framed by two ancient cuts in polished bone. There's a strange comfort in that narrow field of vision. It forces you to stop scanning the whole world and just look straight ahead. One slice at a time, one step, one breath, one seal track, one gust of wind. When the goggles return to him, the elder wraps them in soft sealskin and places them beside his bedroll. You do the same with yours. Fold them gently, strap tucked in, placed carefully on the ledge beside your sleeping mat. It's a little absurd how much respect you give them, but it doesn't feel silly. Not out here. Before you sleep, someone mutters a half-joke about adding decorative beads to his goggles, just to see if anyone notices. The idea sparks laughter, which settles into sleepy silence. Your eyes are heavy. The snow house sighs softly as the wind shifts outside. You don't dream right away. You hover in that in-between place, half awake, half floating, somewhere between firelight and frost. And the last thing you see before slipping under is the faint gleam of your goggles in the low lamp glow, waiting for morning. Morning in the Arctic arrives more like a suggestion than a statement. There's no blinding sunrise, no sudden blast of gold spilling across the snow. Instead, the darkness fades reluctantly into a silvery gray, like someone slowly turning up the dimmer switch. You open your eyes to the sound of snow shifting on the roof, and the low melodic murmur of someone starting a small fire in the center of the snow house. You stretch beneath your furs. Every joint makes its opinion known. The cold sneaks in wherever you left an edge uncovered. You sit up, pull your coat tight, and fumble for your goggles. There they are, just where you left them. Still whole, still familiar, still smelling faintly of smoke and wood. You strap them on before even stepping outside. Not because it's too bright yet, but because it's a habit, a quiet ritual, like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. There's comfort in routine, especially when the routine keeps your eyes from burning out of your skull. Outside, the world is still. The dogs are alert again, tails thumping softly as you pass. The snow stretches in every direction, touched here and there with wind-etched ripples. You squint through the goggles, scanning the horizon for signs of motion, smoke, tracks, the flick of a ptarmigan wing. Today, the plan is to head east. There's a narrow inlet where the ice often cracks earlier than expected, forming breathing holes for seals. It's a long shot, but sometimes that's exactly where the best chances lie. Besides, the journey itself teaches you more than the outcome. As you load the sled, you notice one of the younger hunters fiddling with his own goggles. He's carved his from a chunk of driftwood, and the grain is working against him. The slit alignment is just a little too high, causing him to tilt his head forward like a nodding duck. You offer a suggestion. Tilt the frame, not the whole head, and he smiles, grateful and embarrassed in equal measure. Everyone's goggles are slightly different. Some are slim, elegant, barely more than a strip across the eyes. Others are thicker, almost mask-like, carved to follow the contours of the cheek and brow. One hunter has painted tiny red dots along the outer edge of his. Nobody's sure if it's for decoration or to keep the spirits away. Maybe both. You set off across the snow, the sled gliding behind you. There's a certain squeak to the runners this morning, just enough friction to let you know the snow is dry and powdery. Ideal for moving fast, but tricky for stopping without a tumble. As you move, you become acutely aware of how your goggles affect everything you do. Your field of view is narrowed, yes, but it's also focused. Like tunnel vision, but in a good way. You scan more carefully, notice the slight dip where a snow-covered seal den might be hiding. The wind shifts and you catch the scent of something. Not strong, not definite. Just a hint of salt, maybe, or musk. You pause, signaling the others. A debate begins, low and murmured. Is it worth checking the inlet? Or double back toward the ice ridge where polar bear tracks were seen last week? No one wants to run into a bear unprepared, not even with a good set of goggles. This sparks an impromptu round of storytelling. One older hunter tells of the time he mistook a sleeping bear for a boulder, only to realize his error when the boulder stood up and sneezed. Another claims his grandfather once fashioned goggles out of fishbone in an emergency, strapping them on with dried grass and sheer desperation. You chuckle. The stories are half truth, half brag, and all heart. You notice how the goggles always play a role, not just as gear, but as characters. Tools that whisper warnings, save lives, betray you at the worst moment, or gift you a glimpse of something rare. There's a quiet scholarly debate among Arctic researchers about whether these goggles count as the earliest forms of wearable optics. Do they qualify as sunglasses in the modern sense, or are they something entirely different, closer to a visor or a mask, or even an expression of identity? No one agrees, probably because you can't box something this old and this personal into one neat category. You make it to the inlet by midday. The sun, what little there is of it, glows behind a veil of cloud. But even that light is sharp enough to bounce off the ice and sting unprotected eyes. You're grateful, once again, for the goggles. The ice at the inlet is uneven, corrugated like frozen waves. You move carefully, testing each step, scanning for cracks. A small cluster of bubbles trapped below the surface catches your eye. You crouch. Could be a breathing hole. Could be nothing. You press your palm to the ice. Cold shoots up your arm. You knock gently with a bone tool. The sound is solid but hollow. Maybe worth waiting. So you wait. Patience is the unspoken rule here. The goggles may help you see, but they don't hurry the seal. You sit, still as a cairn, wind tugging at your hood. Time folds in on itself. 10 minutes. 20, 40. You lose count. Then, just when you think you've imagined it, a ripple. A dark shape moves beneath the surface. Slow, cautious, alive. A breath. A whisper of sound. And then it's gone. No catch today. But the moment was enough. You saw it. Through the slits of your goggles, the world parted, just long enough to reveal a secret. On the way back, no one says much. There's no need. The snow squeaks. The dogs pant. Your breath fogs the inside of your hood. And your goggles, scratched, soot-stained, perfectly carved, stay snug against your face, shielding your eyes from the pale, relentless sky. You don't remember falling asleep exactly. One moment you are watching the fire's last flickers dance along the snow walls, and the next, you're blinking against the dull glow of another Arctic day. Not full sunlight, of course not, but that pale metallic shimmer that makes the whole snow house feel like the inside of a pearl. You stretch again, slower this time, your joints protesting just a little louder. Outside, someone's already tending to the dogs, their yips and thuds like soft percussion against the morning quiet. The air is thick with the scent of seal oil and yesterday's boiled meat, which, oddly, smells better now than it did when it was fresh. You retrieve your goggles without thinking. They're part of your daily rhythm now, as essential as your mittens or your knife. As you fit them onto your face, you remember something strange. A dream. You were swimming, not in water, but in snow. And through your goggles, the snow sparkled gold. Probably not prophetic. Still, you hum the tune from the dream under your breath as you gear up. Today's destination is an abandoned hunting site. Not ancient, just old enough to carry a whisper of memory. A place where your uncles hunted, and their uncles before them. Rumors say the wooden storage racks still stand, albeit at odd angles. And if you're lucky, there might even be a forgotten bone tool or two buried in the snowdrifts. You set out with a small group, sleds lightly packed. The dogs are eager today, ears forward, tails flicking like impatient punctuation marks. The snow is firmer here, marked by old wind patterns that left ridges like frozen waves. Every once in a while, your goggles catch a glint, sunlight reflecting off a stray ice shard. Without protection, that glint could burn a blind spot into your vision. With goggles, it's just a flicker, a passing thought. About halfway to the site, a light snow begins to fall, not the heavy, wet kind that clings to everything. This is more of a gentle sift, like someone shaking powdered sugar across the sky. You're grateful for the narrow slits in your goggles. They keep the snow out of your eyes, but let the view in, dim and softened like a half-remembered story. You spot the hunting site just before midday. It's subtle, an unnatural shape in a world of soft curves. The racks are still there, their long uprights jutting into the air like the ribs of some ancient animal. One has collapsed sideways, now buried halfway under snow, while the others stand in crooked formation. Everyone fans out, poking through the site in respectful silence. This isn't a grave, but it holds weight all the same. History isn't always written. It's tied, carved, and weathered. You kneel by what looks like a half-buried pile of firewood, brushing snow away with your mitt. Not firewood. Bones. Whale ribs, you think, probably used to brace a tent or support a drying rack. One piece has faint notches along the side. Deliberate. Could be measurements. Could be decoration. The goggles help. With their narrowed view, you're able to zero in on small details. A fragment of sinew still tied to a bone hook. A strip of old hide worn into suede by wind and time. One of your companions lets out a soft whistle. He's uncovered what looks like the handle of a snow knife, carved from driftwood and inlaid with tiny bits of shell. It becomes clear that this wasn't just a functional camp, it had personality. Someone here cared enough to shape their tools beautifully, even when nobody was watching, even when the sky threatened to swallow the world whole. You sit back on your heels, goggles still snug against your face, and imagine the camp as it once was. Hunters sitting where you now sit. Fires glowing where snow has now reclaimed the earth. Maybe laughter. Maybe arguments over the best seal trails. Definitely the clatter of bones and the quiet scrape of blades being sharpened. And somewhere in that past, someone, maybe a distant relative, maybe not, sits hunched near the firelight, carving goggles, polishing slits, adding a bead, a mark, a twist of seal sinew for flair. The same motions you went through, the same calluses on fingers, the same slight worry. Will they fit? Will they crack? Will they hold? Historians still argue whether these early snow goggles were solely utilitarian or if they carried social meaning, status, clan identity, even flirtation. Some believe a particularly fine pair of goggles could be a courting gift. Others scoff. But then again, in a world of endless white, a carefully carved detail speaks volumes. As you rest, another companion wanders over with a grin and lifts his goggles. His cheeks are red from the cold, his breath forming little clouds. You think they had stories for their goggles, he asks. Like, these were my father's, and he saw the great polar bear through them. You chuckle. Of course, and his father saw the polar bear twice. Laughter ripples through the group. A shared moment. One of those rare, warm things you carry with you on the colder days. Eventually, you prepare to leave. Not much to take, just memories, a shell bead or two, a few photos if you're the kind of hunter who carries a camera, which today someone is. The wind picks up as you fasten your hood again. The snow has stopped falling, but the sky looks ready for more. As you slide your goggles back down over your eyes, the world narrows once more. But it doesn't feel restrictive. It feels right, like squinting into a memory, like finding focus in the middle of vastness. You begin the journey back with a quieter sled. The dogs seem to know this was a place of stories, not shouting. The ice creaks beneath your runners and the snow sighs in the wind. The goggles shield your eyes, but somehow let all of it in. By now, you've noticed something curious, how wearing the goggles changes not just what you see, but how you see. After so many days peering through two thin slits carved into bone or driftwood, your vision has adapted. You've started to trust the narrow field, the sharper contrast. Your eyes roam differently now, drawn to movement rather than color, shadow rather than shape. You might even say your brain has tuned itself to the rhythm of slit vision. Everything you spot feels more intentional, like a secret finally choosing to show itself. You've become more patient, more observant, and, dare you admit it, a bit smug when you notice details others miss. Not that you'd say it out loud, of course. That would be uncool. But it's there, quietly nestled between your fur hood and your self-esteem. Today, the hunt is paused. Instead, the focus is on maintenance. After all, survival isn't just about knowing where the seals breathe. It's about making sure your gear doesn't betray you at the worst moment. And that includes your goggles. You sit with a small group in the partial shelter of a stone windbreak, knees tucked under your parka, working a tiny scrap of sinew between your fingers. The goggles are in your lap. One of the slits has started to fray at the edges. Not enough to ruin them, but enough to catch your attention. Beside you, someone else is whittling a new pair from a chunk of washed-up wood. The process is meditative, shaving, measuring, shaving again. The eye slits have to be just the right width, too wide, and the light sneaks in. Too narrow, and you're navigating the Arctic like a confused mole. It's a Goldilocks situation, except with way more snow and significantly higher stakes. Nearby, a younger boy, maybe 13, maybe 14, asks the question that's probably been bouncing around in every curious mind since the first pair of goggles was carved. What if we just made the whole thing out of glass? The group snorts. Someone mutters something about frostbite and shattered eyeballs. You offer the gentler answer. Glass freezes, it fogs, and it breaks. You tap your own goggles. This doesn't. But the question lingers. There's always a tug of war between tradition and temptation. The idea of improving something ancient is as old as the tools themselves. And yet, here you are wearing a piece of tech so old it predates your great anything. And it still works. Glass may be clever. Bone is wiser. There's a story told sometimes, quietly around the seal oil lamp, about a hunter who refused to wear goggles. Said he could squint hard enough to manage. Claimed he didn't need face cages. For a while, he did fine. Maybe even better than fine. Until the day came when he wandered too far on a bright morning and came back stumbling, eyes swollen, blinded by the very light he mocked. Some say he recovered. Others say he didn't. The lesson sticks, though. The snow doesn't care about your pride. You sand the edges of your goggles with a bit of dried fish skin. It works surprisingly well, slightly abrasive with just enough oil to keep the bone smooth. You trace the line of the slit with your thumb, making sure it's still narrow and even. These aren't just tools, they're something more like co-pilots, partners. You trust them with your vision, literally. There's a quiet debate among historians about when exactly the Inuit began using goggles. Some argue it goes back 2,000 years, based on artifacts found on the western Alaskan coast. Others think it's even older, tracing similar slit-eye visors in Siberian and Yupik cultures. But like so many things in oral traditions, the age matters less than the lineage. This wasn't an invention so much as a gradual sharpening of instinct. Your grandfather used goggles. So did his grandmother. The design might shift. Some families carve wide slits for brighter coastal zones. Others prefer tighter ones for inland glare. But the function stays steady. 1,000 years of wisdom wrapped around your face with sinew cord and a sprinkle of soot. Speaking of soot, you grab the small pouch tied to your belt. Inside, fine charcoal powder. Not much, just a pinch. You rub it along the inside surface of the goggles, staining the bone around the slits. It helps cut down the glare even more, nature's sunglasses lens coating. Plus, it gives the goggles a distinct look, almost like mascara for bone. Another hunter leans over to inspect. "Nice touch," he says. "Very fashionable." You give him a shrug. "Gotta look good when the polar bear sees me." The group laughs. Laughter is warm, and out here, warmth is more precious than meat. Maintenance takes most of the morning. Straps are replaced, slits are recut, soot is refreshed. There's even a contest, informal of course, to see whose goggles have the best craftsmanship. The quiet winner is a girl whose pair features a subtle curve in the wood, hugging her cheekbones just so. She claims it makes the wind slide off more easily. No one argues. By mid-afternoon, the goggles are back in action. The sun, what there is of it, is higher now, and the world is startlingly bright. Even through the slits, the white seems to hum. You take a short walk from camp, just far enough to test the light. As you scan the snowy field, your eyes instinctively find the shadows, the flickers, the movement. There's a patch in the snow that looks odd, too smooth. You squint through your goggles. Ah, a fresh snowdrift formed over something solid, a buried sled, a frozen seal cache. You make a mental note to check later. The goggles, once again, prove their worth. Back at camp, the sun starts to dip. You huddle around the fire, goggles pushed up on your forehead now. They're not just for function anymore. They're part of your silhouette, part of your story. The sky is slipping into that odd Arctic twilight now. Neither day nor night, just a kind of pearly pause between. You sit beside the fire, its orange glow flickering against the snow walls and making the soot-darkened rims of your goggles seem almost theatrical. Someone stokes the flames, and the smell of charred seal fat wafts gently into the air. Smoky, greasy, oddly nostalgic. Your goggles rest in your lap again, but now they feel like part of your body even when they're off. Your cheeks still carry the faint imprint of the straps, a mark of belonging in this cold place. You stretch your legs, yawn, and settle into the evening with the quiet satisfaction of someone who's earned their rest. Tonight, the stories start early. They always begin the same way. Someone murmurs a few words, half joking, half serious, about the old goggles. Not yours or mine, but the ones made from ivory, with slits so fine they were practically eyelash width. You listen, head tilted slightly, knowing the rhythm. You've heard versions before, but still, every telling brings something new. This time, the story's about a man named Akluk. Not famous, just famously stubborn. Lived way up near the Mackenzie Delta, and according to the tale, he once carved a pair of goggles from the jawbone of a narwhal. Long and curved, they supposedly gave him almost 180 degrees of vision. Or so he claimed. Others swore he could spot a snow hare a mile off and tell you what it was dreaming about. Historians still argue whether narwhal bone was ever actually used, someone offers into the firelight. trying not to sound too much like a know-it-all. Most think it was too brittle. But brittle men tell the best lies, another replies, raising a cup. You grin because the debate is beside the point. The goggles are the story. They're a symbol, a metaphor, a personal talisman. Everyone has their own. Yours might be plain, practical, smooth bone, with barely a notch for flair. Someone else's might be carved with tiny whales or crescent moons. Another pair might carry soot patterns, beadwork, or scraps of painted hide. Each pair whispers something. You slip yours back on just for the feel of it. The world narrows again, but instead of shutting things out, it sharpens them, makes every movement more precise. You turn your head slightly and catch sight of someone skinning a fish. Not much light, barely a glow, but you see it all. The flick of the wrist, the shine of the blade, the way the fish seems to shimmer as it parts under the practiced hands. Later, someone pulls out an old goggle frame, broken, splintered, useless, except as a relic. It's made from driftwood and lashed with what looks like reindeer sinew. Someone's etched a symbol on the side, 2 crossing harpoons, or maybe 2 dancing birds. Depends how sleepy your eyes are. They pass it around. Everyone runs a thumb along the edge like petting a memory. When it reaches you, the wood is still warm. Or maybe your hands are. Either way, it feels alive. You think about how even broken goggles are kept, not for their usefulness, but because they were useful. They once guarded someone's sight, helped someone hunt, maybe even saved someone's life. That deserves to be remembered. You wonder what happens to your goggles when you're gone. Do they get buried with you, handed down, melted into new tools? You've never really asked. Might be time to find out. The fire starts to settle. Someone tosses a bit of dried moss on top, and it flares briefly, throwing sparks up like sleepy fireflies. Around you, people begin to drift toward their shelters, muttering goodnights and pulling their hoods up. You decide to take one last walk before turning in. The air is colder now, that kind of cold that bites through every seam in your clothes and nips at the edge of your eyelashes. You pull your hood tighter, fasten your mittens, and lower your goggles back into place. The landscape glows with a bluish silver under the moonlight. Snow dunes ripple outward like a frozen ocean. The wind whistles gently, threading its way through ice ridges and tents like a ghost too polite to knock. You walk slowly, savoring the hush. With your goggles on, the world feels like a dream, filtered, faded, oddly intimate. You spot tiny tracks crossing your path. Fox, maybe, or ptarmigan. Hard to tell. The goggles make it easier to follow the pattern, easier to notice that the gait changed halfway through. Maybe it paused, maybe it was being hunted, maybe it stopped to sneeze. You'll never know. But now you're thinking about it. There's something sacred in that, really. A pair of bone goggles gives you nothing more than a slit of sight. But within that slit, you see more, focus more, imagine more. At the edge of camp, a pile of snow catches your eye. Not remarkable at first, but as you step closer, you see a glint beneath it. Metal. A forgotten snow knife, perhaps, or a lost binding. You make a mental note to return at first light. Could be nothing. Could be the start of another story. You turn back. The tents are darker now. Only a few glimmers remain. Embers in the fire ring. A bit of lamplight through skin walls. The dogs are quiet. The air has stilled. You raise your goggles one last time before bed and let the chill kiss your cheeks. The lines from the straps are still faint on your face, and you know you'll wake up with them again tomorrow. You smile. You're okay with that. You're wearing history, after all. You wake slowly, blinking into the filtered morning light that seeps through the edges of your sealskin shelter. It's not exactly bright out here in the Arctic sense, but the snow outside is already beginning its shimmer, reflecting every glimmer of light like a mirror that's been lightly dusted with stars. The sun doesn't so much rise here as hover, uncertain, behind a curtain of white haze. But you can tell today will be clear and bright, blindingly bright. You stretch inside your sleeping furs and reach for the goggles you'd left by your head. Almost a reflex now, like someone in warmer lands grabbing their glasses first thing. The familiar feel of the smooth, slightly chilled bone makes you smile. You lift them, inspect the slits for any overnight frost, then tie them into place. Click, snug. Your vision narrows instantly, and so does your focus. Outside, the snow crunches as you step into the open air. The rest of the camp is stirring too. Dogs being fed, boots being shaken out, breakfast being cooked over seal oil flames. The smell hits you instantly, rich, smoky, deeply salty. You don't need much to start the day, just a strip of dried fish and a cup of something hot. But you take it all in as though it's a banquet. Today's plan is a bit different. You're not heading out to hunt, but rather to trade. A group from a neighboring camp has arrived, and they've brought things that don't exist within your own circle. Bits of copper, strips of thick caribou hide, soapstone bowls, and, most intriguingly, 2 pairs of goggles made from materials you've never seen used before. One is carved not from bone or wood, but from antler, polished so finely it gleams in the sun. The other, driftwood, but with inlaid bands of baleen, giving it a flexible, almost springy frame. Your fingers twitch with curiosity. You walk over, goggles still in place, and squat beside the trader's offerings. Trade is quiet, polite, and, despite the icy air, always warm. It's not about haggling or pushing for more. It's about respect. What's offered and what's received carry weight far beyond their practical value. You offer up a small bone carving in exchange for a look at the antler goggles. The trader nods. As you turn them over in your hands, your first reaction is surprise. They're heavier than yours. Warmer, though, and beautifully detailed with sinew wrapping tight around the hinges like little decorative scars. The slits are narrower than what you're used to, but just as effective. You put them on. For a moment, you're someone else, a hunter from a different line, wearing someone else's wisdom. It's strange and wonderful. You hand them back. The trader gives you a knowing nod as if to say, "Yeah." They're special. Over the course of the morning, you see goggles everywhere, some tucked under hoods, others tied to belts. All slightly different, all united by their singular purpose. It starts to dawn on you how far these goggles have traveled. Some styles hint at lands far inland, places where the snow is dry and powdery instead of packed and crusted. Others reflect coastal influence, wider slits for navigating the shimmer of sun off icy water. Historians still debate the path these designs took. Were they passed from one group to the next, like a whisper riding the wind? Or did different communities arrive at similar designs independently, the way birds on different continents build nearly identical nests? You find that question oddly soothing. Maybe it's both. Maybe humans, no matter where they stand on the globe, tend to solve the same problems in similar ways when their world turns white and painfully bright. Later in the day, someone produces a very old pair from a seal hide pouch. They're cracked and warped and practically falling apart, but they are special. An heirloom, the kind of artifact that should be in a museum, if museums existed here. Instead, they're shown with quiet reverence. No one touches. Everyone leans in. These goggles are ivory. You can tell from the pale yellow gleam beneath the soot. The slits are hair-thin, and the edges are etched with tiny markings. Clan symbols, perhaps. Or prayers. Maybe a combination of both. The owner doesn't speak as he unwraps them, just lets everyone look. You study them closely. There's a small chip on the inner rim, where they likely rubbed against the bridge of someone's nose for years. There's no strap anymore, just faded holes where sinew once passed through. You imagine the person who wore them, their hunts, their breath fogging the inside of the goggles as they tracked seal prints across the ice, their moment of stillness before a throw. The goggles weren't just functional, they were witnesses. That thought sits with you for a while. When the sun reaches its apex, though you can barely call it high here, the traders begin to pack. Farewells are exchanged. Someone gifts a pair of their handmade goggles to a visiting boy, who accepts them like he's just been handed a crown. He ties them on immediately, puffing up just a little. You remember your first pair, carved by your uncle, too big and the slits were crooked. You wore them anyway, proud as anything. He later made you a better fitting one, but you kept the first. You still have it somewhere tucked in your gear, as bent and awkward as your first steps on snow. You realize you're not alone in that nostalgia. Nearby, someone else is pulling out their old pair. For every hunter here, goggles are a rite of passage, a literal lens through which they first saw the Arctic, not just as home, but as something navigable, survivable, and beautiful. Before bed, you take a quiet walk, just to feel the difference in light. It's softer now, with the blue tones creeping in. You test your goggles against the fading brightness. Still good. You're not sure when exactly you'll need to make a new pair, but you'll know. You always do. For now, they still fit just right. Still guard your sight. Still speak of 1,000 past winters, and maybe a few hundred more to come. The next morning, your dreams still clinging to you like wisps of snow, you stir beneath your heavy furs to a sound so subtle it takes you a moment to name it. Scraping, rhythmic, measured, familiar. You blink and sit up slowly, brushing the condensation from your eyelashes. The shelter is colder than usual. Someone must have slipped out early. You know the sound even before you crawl outside. Someone's carving. There, just beyond the fire ring, kneeling on a rolled-up hide and bathed in the quiet morning glow, is one of the younger hunters, Kunik, a boy not quite old enough to grow a beard, but old enough to know the weight of responsibility. In his hands is a sliver of caribou bone, notched along one edge. He doesn't look up as you approach, but he knows you're there. He's making goggles, his first. You smile. He's focused, tongue pressed slightly between his teeth, scraping with the small, crooked-bladed knife his grandfather gave him. Not exactly a tool you'd find in a modern workshop, but somehow it always seems to know what to do. The bone is dry and pale, warmed slightly from his hands. You squat beside him, letting your own breath puff gently into the air. "Too wide?" he asks, not looking up. "Maybe," you reply, peering at the slits. "Or maybe your face is too narrow." He chuckles softly. The tension breaks just a little. That's the thing about first pairs. They're never perfect, but they're always yours. As Kunik continues working, you remember your own carving days, sitting for hours, staring at a curved bit of whalebone, willing it to become something useful. You scraped and shaped, worried you'd split it, or gouge too deep. You fretted about the slits being crooked, and they were, but they worked. And when you put them on and stepped into that blinding world for the first time, everything felt different, like you'd just grown a new layer of skin. Somewhere nearby, someone else is doing the same thing, scraping, shaping, muttering to themselves. It's not a unique moment, this one. It happens over and over, year after year, in every coastal and tundra-bound community where snow rules the land. There's even a term some elders use for it, the blink of bone. That first instant when your homemade goggles meet your face and you see the world not just dimmer, but deeper. Historians still argue whether this carving tradition was passed strictly through apprenticeship or if it emerged spontaneously. Each generation drawn instinctively to solve the same problem with the same material. Some oral traditions suggest a mythic origin, that the first goggles were gifted by the spirits of the sea to a young hunter who was blind but could still see tracks in the snow. Kunik sneezes, bone dust puffing into the air like powder. "Too dry," he mutters. You pass him a small seal oil cloth to wipe the edge. He nods gratefully, then goes back to work. The beauty of making goggles is how little you need, but how much attention it demands. A few inches of bone, a bit of soot, a strip of sinew, and your whole focus. The curves must match your brow. The slits must narrow just enough to block the horizontal glare, but still let you spot the faint outline of a seal hole. The inside edges must be softened so they don't bite into your skin when the wind picks up. Every line matters. As Kunik works, you find yourself falling into a rhythm beside him. You pull out your own tools and a sliver of wood you've been meaning to shape into a backup pair. Something smaller, more travel-ready. Not essential, but it feels right to work alongside someone carving there first, like a silent handoff of tradition. Hours pass, measured not in minutes, but in sun angles and hunger pangs. People come and go, offering tips, jokes, or just a nod of respect. The act of carving goggles in public is almost ceremonial. It says, "I'm preparing." It says, "I trust myself." It says, "I'm not blind out here anymore." Eventually, Kunik holds up his pair. They're rough. One slits slightly longer. The soot's uneven. The curve is generous on one side and a bit shy on the other. But they're beautiful. You see pride flicker in his eyes, half hidden behind a practiced scowl. You help him tie the sinew cord, tight but not too tight. He places the goggles on his face. They fit. He turns toward the light. "Wow," he says, voice nearly lost to the snow. "Hurts less, doesn't it?" you ask. He nods slowly. And it feels quiet. That's the other thing they don't tell you. Goggles don't just soften light, they soften everything. The world goes from a loud, white chaos to something contained, framed, manageable. Kunik takes a few steps, then breaks into a short run across the crusted snow. His laughter echoes, and when he turns back, the goggles are still in place. You remember doing the same thing. Later, around the fire, he lays the goggles beside him like a prized possession. They sit between him and the world. Everyone notices, no one comments. But they smile. You catch his eye. He lifts his cup in quiet salute, and somewhere inside you feel the thread of history tug gently, an unbroken line of sight, passed down from hand to hand, bone to bone, slit to slit. Snow is falling now, not a heavy storm, just the kind of gentle flurry that swirls and eddies like a flock of sleepy birds. You step out of the shelter, pulling your hood tighter as you scan the horizon. Everything's white on white, but your goggles cut the glare just enough to pick out shapes. A snowdrift here, a ridge there, the lean silhouette of an Inuit, those stone waymarkers stacked like frozen travelers. Today's plan isn't about hunting, carving, or even trading. It's about traveling. You're heading out with a small group to check on a distant fish cache, buried months ago beneath the ice and marked with subtle clues only a trained eye could follow. This is a rite of trust, a journey of navigation through a world so dazzling, so flat, it could swallow your sense of direction within minutes. Without your goggles, you'd be blind by noon. Literally. Snow blindness isn't just a discomfort out here. It's a danger, a mistake, a humiliation. Your elders still talk about that one time, years ago, when the youngest uncle forgot his goggles and had to be led home by a dog. His eyes swelled shut for 3 days. He still twitches at midday glare. You check your pair once more, frost wiped, soot intact, slits straight, and step into the white. The world outside is silent in that peculiar Arctic way, like every sound has been filtered through layers of wool. Boots crunch, sled runners squeak, a dog sneezes, and beneath it all, the soft hush of falling snow. It takes effort to find your bearings. You rely on subtle cues, wind-packed ridges, the lean of a snow fence, even how the light hits distant ice. And your goggles, they help more than you'd think. The narrow slits focus your vision, strip away distraction, and force you to see, not just look. Historians still debate whether the goggles were primarily a tool of vision or of perception, designed to help a hunter concentrate as much as shield their eyes. Some say the slits were more than practical. They were almost meditative, framing the world into digestible lines, a way of seeing what matters. You wonder about that as you move forward. You've worn goggles for so long now that you almost forget what the world looked like without them. You can vaguely remember the ache of too much light, that sickly, blinding whiteness that lingered behind your eyelids. But it's distant. Now everything you see is curved, framed, and deeply, wonderfully subdued. The snow begins to pick up mid-journey. Visibility drops, but your goggles hold. The others tighten their hoods and lean into the wind. A small flag marker flaps ahead, the halfway point. Everyone stops briefly, adjusts gear, swaps jokes too muffled to understand. The air smells like fur and breath and cold. Then someone gestures, just off the trail. You peer through your goggles and spot it, the tiniest hump in the snow. Barely visible, but it's a sign. A marker left months ago. Someone packed the snow a little tighter, arranged stones in a hidden pattern beneath it. You step off the path and prod gently with your staff. The others gather. You dig. Soon the cache reveals itself, a hollow packed with fish, sealed in ice like some prehistoric freezer. It's a beautiful thing, this preservation. The fish are still good, clean, cold, safe. You take only what you need, seal the rest, mark the snow again with a twist of caribou fur. Leave it for next time. On the way back, the storm light turns strange, blue-gray and flat, the kind of light that plays tricks. Without goggles, you'd lose the trail in seconds. Even now, it takes effort to stay locked on. But there's something comforting in the ritual. Scan, step, scan again. The goggles narrow your view, but widen your attention. You become aware of the smallest changes. The dip of snow, a hint of shadow, the gleam of ice where it shouldn't be. Someone stumbles ahead. A dog howls. You pause to adjust a loose strap, feeling the wind tug at your sleeves. A patch of sunlight breaks through just for a second, lighting up the slope like a silver mirror. It's breathtaking and brutal. You squint through the slit and whisper a quiet thanks to whoever first thought to blacken bone and call it a lens. Later, back at camp, everyone is flushed from cold and victory. The fish are gutted, laid out to freeze again. You unstrap your goggles and rub your eyes, which feel warm and oddly heavy. Not tired, just protected. Inside your shelter, you hang them carefully above your bedroll. They're still damp with breath, but that's how you know they've done their job. Outside, the snow still falls. You drift to sleep wondering what the first hunter saw, truly saw, when he put on his own first pair of carved goggles. Did he think, yes, this will do? Or did he just squint less and keep walking? Either way, you're grateful. Your eyelids flutter open to the softest patter of snow against hide. Morning again. Though out here, morning and night are suggestions more than rules. The sun spins low on the horizon this time of year, casting long shadows even at what your internal clock insists must be noon. Still, the light is strong enough to demand protection. You reach for your goggles, familiar now, a natural extension of your face. The leather ties are stiff with yesterday's sweat and frost, but the bone still holds the slight curve of your brow. You wipe the soot-smeared slits with a bit of fur, refit the straps, and step outside. Today's goal is less about travel or danger and more about decoration. Because yes, even utilitarian things can be beautiful. And your people, though practical, though bound by cold and hunger and long stretches of silence, have never shied away from style. You walk over to the elders' shelter where the scent of seal oil and old stories hangs in the air. She's already out, hunched over a toolkit made of driftwood and ivory. She doesn't look up as you approach, but she knows who you are. Want to learn the fancy stuff? She asks, voice like snow-brushing stone. You nod, and so begins your crash course in Arctic flair. Decorating goggles isn't about showing off, it's about meaning, status, identity. A carved spiral might signal a gifted navigator. A notch along the brow? Good with dogs. Some even inlay tiny chips of ivory or abalone shell, though that's reserved for weddings or festivals, unless you're trying to impress someone, of course. Today, the elder shows you a simpler method. She presses a thin-tipped bone awl into your hand and points to a test piece. Start here, not on the good pair. I'm not fixing it if you mess up. Fair. You begin practicing shallow grooves, swirls, cross-hatching. The trick isn't just the pattern, but how it reflects light when worn. These goggles do more than shield your eyes. They broadcast who you are, what you value, and where you fit in the web of stories all around you. Historians still argue whether these markings were merely decorative, or if they held secret meanings, messages only the trained could read. Some think they were clan symbols. Others believe they tracked journeys like a portable diary. There's even a fringe theory that they were mnemonic devices, memory aids carved into daily objects to help oral historians keep track of events. You like that idea, that every mark is a footnote, a breadcrumb, a whispered, "Remember this." You spend hours tracing lines, scraping tiny dots into the surface of scrap bone. The elder says nothing, just hums occasionally, something tuneless and old. Finally, you risk trying one small design on the outer edge of your own goggles. A tiny wave, just enough to be personal. Not bad, she mutters. Won't make the snow run in fear, but it's a start. Later, you gather with the others around the communal lamp. Everyone's goggles hang from belts, shoulders, or hooks, each pair different. One has a painted line of ochre, another a braided strap dyed with berries. Kunix, you notice, now sports a tiny scratch along the bridge. Not a design, just the mark of use. But he touches it with pride. A young girl toddles over to the pile and picks up a massive old pair. She claps them to her face, upside down, and beams through the slits. Everyone laughs. One hunter whispers, "She sees the future now." You lean back, watching the firelight flicker across bone and soot. It strikes you, not for the first time, how much history lives in the smallest things. Not in weapons, not in monuments, but in whatever people wear to get through the day. Goggles, gloves, boots, patched a dozen times, objects with stories baked in. Even now, far to the south, those stories are being studied, displayed, catalogued. Inuit snow goggles, Ilgak, some call them, sit behind glass in climate-controlled museums. The labels list their dimensions, region, approximate age. But they miss the real details, the scratches from a near miss with a narwhal tusk, the burnt edge from holding them too close to the lamp, the decoration you carved in a hurry because someone was watching. The elder sees you staring at your goggles. "Don't just wear them," she says. "Leave something behind in them." You nod, unsure if you understand yet. But you will. Later, before bed, you hang them as always. But this time you add something else. A loop of woven sinew with a tiny shell attached. It'll jingle slightly when you move. No one will know what it means, except you. The air outside crackles with cold this morning, colder than it's been in weeks. Your breath comes out in silver bursts, and even the dogs seem to grumble as they stir from their snow-packed nests. It's the kind of day when metal freezes to skin, when even thoughts feel slower, like they're wading through syrup. And yet, despite the chill, it's time to visit. Not the social kind, mind you. No seal feast or drum dancing tonight. This is a visit of respect, one that stretches across generations. You're headed to see the old things, the ancient things, the things left behind by ancestors whose names are long gone, but whose hands shaped the same snow, watched the same ice crack, and yes, wore the same kind of goggles. Your elder hands you a pack and a quiet nod. You follow the dog sled trail east to a low ridge marked by wind-smoothed stones. Just past that, nestled in a curve of the land, is a small site, barely visible under the snow. But you know it's there. Everyone does. This is where fragments of the old village lie. Not buried in the earth like southern ruins, but resting, as if the land simply exhaled and let them be. Whalebone rafters poke from the snow like the ribs of some sleeping giant, bits of carved antler, a shard of ceramic no one can identify, and tucked near the remains of a stone lamp, goggles, or what's left of them. The bone is pitted, weather-worn, but unmistakable. The eye slits are still sharp, still deliberate. There's even a faint groove along the edge, perhaps a decorative line, perhaps just the echo of a hand that shaped them with care 1,000 years ago. You hold them gently, not reverently, just gently. They're not relics, they're reminders. Historians still argue about the origins of these goggles. Some claim they were invented independently by Arctic cultures, stretching from Siberia to Greenland. Others believe a single ancient innovation spread slowly, carried by trade routes and oral stories. And then there's the theory, still debated, that the design predates the Inuit entirely, passed down from earlier peoples like the Inuit, whose presence still lingers in whispers and cautionary tales. Whoever made these goggles, they knew what they were doing. You can tell by the balance, the curve, the subtle tilt of the slits, just enough to block horizontal glare but still allow peripheral vision. You try them on. They don't quite fit your face. They weren't made for you, but through the narrow slits you see the land in a new way. Sharper, older. You sit for a while, letting your legs go numb. The wind pushes snow across your boots in tiny dunes. You imagine the person who wore these last. What were they doing? Hunting, traveling, laughing at a joke you'll never hear? There's something oddly comforting about it, knowing that long before you, someone else stared out across this same frozen world and thought, I need to see better. I need to make something. You stand, brush the snow from your knees, and rewrap the goggles in soft fur before tucking them back where you found them. They're not for taking, just for remembering. On the way home, you think about timelines. Museums list years, centuries, epochs. But here, time folds in on itself. The snow covers and uncovers. Stories get told, forgotten, retold with new flourishes. Maybe 100 years from now, someone will find your goggles. The wave design, the looped shell. They'll wonder about you, what you hunted, who you loved, what made you laugh so hard you had to stop walking. And maybe, if you're lucky, they'll try them on and see the world just a little differently. You return just as the sun dips toward the horizon, painting everything in that strange, eternal dusk. You step into the shelter, unstrap your goggles, and lay them beside the lamp. They look ordinary again, but you know better. They're part of something bigger, a long chain of bone and soot and vision, a story that started long before you and will go on long after. Outside, the wind picks up, but inside it's warm, safe, full of echoes. The storm arrives sometime in the night. You wake to its voice, less a roar and more a constant, low-throated growl, like the land itself is muttering under its breath. Snow pelts the roof of your shelter in thick waves. The sealskin flap at the entrance dances like it's trying to escape. It's the kind of day when no one goes anywhere unless they have to. Which is fine, because today it's all about maintenance. You sit cross-legged by the lamp, your goggles in your lap, a small toolkit beside you, a bone awl, sinew thread, a sliver of caribou rib for scraping. Around you, the others are doing the same, boots being resoled, harpoon heads sharpened, mittens patched. This is a community in hibernation mode, alive and alert, but conserving. Your goggles have held up well. No cracks, no warping. The soot is still rich in the slits, though it flakes just slightly when rubbed. But the strap, that sinew tie you looped through days ago, has begun to fray. Time to reinforce it. You thread the sinew carefully, the motion slow and deliberate. Not because you're overly cautious, though you are, but because there's something meditative about it. The rhythm, the feel of fiber tightening into something reliable. It hits you again. This isn't a tool, it's a companion. Historians often frame objects like these as primitive eyewear. You almost laugh when you think of that term. Primitive has always been a lazy word. These goggles aren't crude, they're optimized. Light, adaptable, tailored. You can fix them with a knife and some patience. Try doing that with a pair of Ray-Bans. And besides, the Inuit didn't just adapt to the Arctic, they thrived in it. They read snowdrifts like maps, hunted by smell, listened for the difference between thick and thin ice using their feet. The goggles were one piece in a vast web of survival tricks and technologies, none of which came with instruction manuals. Just trial, error, and thousands of years of listening. You scrape the inside curve of the goggles with the caribou rib, removing tiny deposits of frost dust and skin oil. You even smooth over your own wave carving, not to erase it, just to let it settle into the surface, the way a whisper fades but still lingers in the walls. The old man across from you is humming again, a tune you now recognize, the one he sings when he's telling stories, though he hasn't said a word today. Still, you listen. His hands move in time with the melody as he relaces the toggles on his mittens. Eventually, someone tells a story about a time when the dogs ran wild in a whiteout and returned on their own, with the sled still upright, miraculously. About a trader from far to the west who had goggles made from shell of all things and claimed they made him see spirits in the snow. Someone else swears they once saw a polar bear with a carved bone stuck in its teeth. Goggles, they say. Smart bear, they add, could probably see better than me. The storm outside howls louder and you laugh softly, because in here the world is still spinning, quietly, steadily. Maintenance days aren't glamorous. They won't get carved into drum songs or passed down as legends. But they matter. They're the reason anything survives at all. There's a saying the elders shared once. The sharpest tool is the one you fix before it breaks. And that's what you're doing now. Not just with the goggles, but with yourself. Giving things the attention they need before cracks grow too wide. Stitching up the small frays. You finish retying the strap. It holds firm. You test the tension, then settle the goggles over your eyes just for a second. The world narrows, then clarifies. The storm's still out there, but inside things are ready. Tomorrow, when the skies calm and the drifts settle, you'll be back out in it, chasing seal tracks, navigating glare ice, maybe spotting a sundog or two. But today is for slowing down, for shaping the tools that shape your days. Someone passes around dried fish. You chew quietly, gaze flicking across the shelter to where someone else is using their knife to clean an old pair of goggles. Not carved, just functional, but loved. And somewhere in that moment you realize that this This gentle act of care, of preservation, isn't just survival. It's a kind of reverence. The storm gives up by morning, not with a bang, but a gentle sigh. When you push open the flap of the shelter, it's like stepping into a freshly shaken snow globe, sky milky with early light, snow so clean it feels wrong to disturb it. The wind's gone still, leaving behind only the soft hiss of settling flakes. You step out in your full gear, goggles strapped in place. The difference is immediate. Without them, the sun reflecting off the snow would hit your eyes like a slap. With them, everything sharpens. Shadows become visible again. Depth returns. The world is no longer flat and hostile. It has dimension, texture, mood. You walk out past the ridge, past the half-covered trail markers, shaped like seals, like whales, like moons. You're not hunting today. Not gathering. Not doing anything particularly essential. You're just walking and watching. This is something no one writes about when they talk about survival. The moments of stillness. The luxury, not of food or fire, but of observation. Of simply being present in a world that doesn't care if you're comfortable, but quietly rewards you when you pay attention. You spot faint ridges where wind combed the snow into corduroy. You notice bird tracks, impossibly small, an Arctic fox's looping trail, vanishing and reappearing like it's toying with you. And then you see it. Another set of goggles, half buried near a wind-scoured boulder. Older than yours by the look of it. Wood, not bone. The straps long gone. You gently dig them out with gloved hands, brush away the frost. They're cracked, split down one side, and one of the eye slits has chipped away. But still, you can tell they mattered to someone. You wonder if they were lost, or if maybe they were left here, like a marker, like someone saying, I came this far, I saw this view, I made it. Historians still debate whether early Inuit traveled long distances with regular seasonal patterns, or if they largely stayed within a home range. The evidence is mixed. Some point to trade items, metal from far-off sources, beads made from foreign shells. Others say those could have come through bartering, not movement. It's one of those questions that might never have a single answer. But standing here now, goggles in hand, you believe in the travelers, in the idea that people walked not just to hunt, but to see, to know. You slip the old goggles into your coat, gently wrapped in a piece of fox fur. Not to keep, just to protect them on the way home. They deserve to be remembered. As you head back, the sun hits its highest point, just a lazy arc above the horizon. The light is fierce, but your eyes are calm behind the slits. You can see every nuance of shadow, every dip and crest. Your goggles aren't just blocking light. They're revealing truths. You think of all the people who've worn versions of these over centuries, people who learned from the land, from their elders, from their mistakes. People who figured out that bone could become vision, that soot could become clarity, that survival could be elegant. And you realize something. You're part of that story. You're not just wearing the goggles, you're continuing them. A new generation will take them on hunts, on visits, on walks, just like this. And one day, maybe someone will find your pair, half buried in the snow near some forgotten trail, and wonder what kind of person carved those soft spirals into the frame. You smile beneath your hood. Let them wonder. You return to camp just as the light begins to dim again, though day and night have always been loose terms this far north. The sun dips lazily, more like a nod than a goodbye, and the snow begins its slow shimmer into blue. Inside the shelter, the fire has been rekindled. Its smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, vanishing into the vent hole like it has somewhere better to be. The warmth is welcome, even though your layers have done their job. You remove your gloves, your boots, then finally your goggles, untying the sinew strap with the gentle care of someone unsheathing something sacred. You hold them a moment longer than usual, because now you realize they're more than tools. They're memory. In design, in function, in spirit. They've seen so much more than sunlight. The child across the way, who's barely into their first winters, scoots closer. They ask about the wave carving again. You've already told the story twice, how it came to you in a dream, how you traced it into the bone with a fish spine, how the curves remind you of summer when the ice cracks and sea things breathe. But you tell it again anyway, because that's what stories are for, repetition with reverence. Then the elder speaks, quietly, almost as if thinking out loud, and says goggles used to be buried with their wearers, like masks, like companions for the next world. You glance at your pair again, suddenly unsure whether to smile or shiver. Historians still argue whether the burial tradition was widespread or just regional. Some Inuit groups left goggles behind, passing them down like heirlooms. Others laid them on the chest of the deceased, slits turned up toward the sky. One archaeologist even claimed they found a pair carved with names, though no one's sure if it was a signature or just wishful thinking. You think about that, about the fine line between fact and poetry. Later, as darkness creeps in completely, you step outside one last time. The stars are blisteringly bright, scattered like bone shards across a velvet sky. The air is sharp, but not cruel. You slide the goggles back over your face, not because you need them, but because you want to see the world through that narrow, ancient lens one more time. The sky narrows, the stars focus. Everything feels older. You think of the first person who ever squinted against the snow and thought, what if I shaped this bone? You imagine them scraping it clean, measuring it by feel, cutting those tiny slits and blackening the edge with soot. You wonder if they were proud, or if they just hoped it would work. Then you realize it did. It worked then, it works now. And that quiet, enduring brilliance, that decision made 1,000 years ago and echoed through your hands today, is what keeps you warm, even in the coldest dark. Word count, 1,505. Wind down, 300 words. Now take a breath. Let the cold air you imagined drift away, replaced by warmth, real or remembered. Picture yourself curled inside that snow-covered shelter, the lamp flickering softly, the carved goggles resting beside you, catching light like tiny sculptures. Everything is still. The storm has passed. The hunt is done. The bone has been shaped, soot added, and the strap tied just right. Outside, the wind hums like a lullaby. Not angry anymore. Just a rhythm. Let yourself sink into the weight of those centuries, the hands that carved, the eyes that squinted, the minds that adapted again and again. You're part of that long line now, a link in a chain of invention, observation, and quiet artistry. One person with warm hands, slow breath, and a story still settling into place. Even the goggles know it's time to rest. Let your breath slow, your shoulders drop. Whatever light flickers nearby, screen, lamp, or fire, let it dim just a little more. And as the snow outside deepens and the stars sharpen in the sky above that vast frozen world, know that you are safe here. You are seen, and you are exactly where you need to be. Close your eyes whenever you're ready. The story will still be here in the morning.